Welcome to the Phil and H Travel Podcast. Is it worth it? Today, we're jumping right into a place that people literally dream about.
Oh, absolutely. It's a massive bucket list destination.
Right. It is Sipadan in Malaysian Borneo. It is universally acknowledged as, one of the greatest scuba diving sites on planet Earth. People save up for years to see it.
Yeah, they really do.
And yet, a genuinely shocking number of people fly all the way across the globe, they step off the boat, and they just go home completely deflated.
Which is heartbreaking when you look at what they spent to get there.
Exactly. Why does that happen? Well, because the logistics, the really intense rationing of access, and all these hidden costs, they just catch them entirely off guard.
Yeah, the fine print is brutal.
So, okay, let's unpack this. But first, a quick note. If you're planning a trip and want the honest, is it worth it verdict before you book, follow the show on Spotify or Apple.
Good advice, because you really need to do your homework for this one.
You definitely do. I mean, imagine planning the trip of a lifetime, spending thousands of dollars, enduring literally days of grueling travel, and realizing at the finish line that you just didn't read the fine print.
And that fine print, I have to say, it is heavier now than it has ever been.
Really? Like worse than before.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
As we look at the 2026 and 2027 season, we are firmly in what I would classify as a permit crunch era.
A permit crunch era. Okay, I like that term.
Right, because today our mission for this deep dive is to dissect every single friction point of this journey for you.
And there are a lot of them.
There really are. We're going to examine the strict government quotas. We're looking at geopolitical security curfews, which literally dictate when you can even be on the water. And we are unpacking the hidden ledgers in your resort bill.
Because at the end of the day, our goal is to give you the ultimate, unfiltered verdict on whether this expedition is actually worth your time, your energy, and obviously your money.
Precisely. Because the entire ecosystem of this destination, I'm talking every resort, every boat, every dollar spent, it all revolves around one artificially scarce resource.
The permit.
Yes, the Sipadan permit.
The golden ticket, essentially. And, I mean, this isn't just a metaphor, right? We are talking about a physical limitation on human beings entering the water.
An absolute hard cap, yes.
This is the engine that drives everything else on this trip. I really want to understand the mechanics of this scarcity because it feels incredibly rigid for a vacation destination. Like, usually places want more tourists, not fewer.
Well, to understand Sipadan, you have to look at the history and, why that scarcity was engineered in the first place.
Okay, take us back.
So decades ago, there were actually resorts right on Sipadan Island itself.
Wait, on the actual island?
Yeah, right on the sand. You could wake up, walk out of your room, and just step directly onto the reef.
That sounds incredible, honestly.
It was amazing for the divers, sure. But the ecological toll of having permanent human infrastructure on that tiny piece of land was just catastrophic.
Ah, right. I can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, you had waste management issues. You had light pollution that was severely disrupting the turtle nesting because this is a major nesting site.
Yeah.
And there was just constant physical damage to the shallow corals from people walking and boating.
So they were basically loving it to death.
Exactly. So Malaysia made this deeply unpopular, but honestly ecologically vital conservation choice. They cleared the island entirely.
Wow. Just evicted everyone.
Yep. The military and park rangers moved in, and the resorts were completely dismantled. Nobody sleeps on Sipadan anymore.
That is a massive move for a government to make.
It was. And to protect the reef going forward, they capped access hard. Right now, there are only about 254 Sipadan permits issued per day.
Wait, per day?
Per day.
Total.
Across the entire world, people want to dive there.
254. I mean, think about that number in the context of global tourism. If you look at the number of people who visit, say, the Eiffel Tower or the Grand Canyon in a single day.
Or even just a standard beach in Hawaii.
Right. 254 is basically a rounding error. It is virtually nothing. And this is where the tension begins for you as a traveler, because I'm assuming those 254 permits aren't just put up on a website for you to buy like a movie ticket or, I don't know, a national park pass.
They absolutely are not. You cannot just walk up to a booth on the beach and hand over your credit card.
So how does it actually work?
The permits are distributed directly to the dive operators and the resorts that are located on the nearby islands, mostly Mabul and Kapolai.
Okay, so the hotels hold the keys.
Exactly. And they are distributed through this highly complex rotating allocation system, which creates a phenomenon that traps a lot of tourists.
The rotation trap.
Right. When you book a resort, They do not give you a Sipadan permit for every day of your stay. They receive a finite stack of permits from the government, and they have to rotate those permits among all their paying guests.
Hold on, let me get this straight. So I could book a 5-day diving vacation, pay full price for everything, fly all the way there, and only actually dive the main attraction once.
Or sometimes not at all, depending on how you booked.
That is wild. That sounds like you have to buy a 3-day hotel package just to enter a lottery for the chance to buy front row tickets to the biggest concert of the year.
That is a terrifyingly accurate analogy.
You're paying for the flights, the room, the overpriced drinks at the bar, all while just sitting around hoping the hotel manager taps you on the shoulder and says, "Good news, you're allowed to go to the concert tomorrow."
That is the exact lived reality of the system. And the cost of that permit, when you finally get tapped on the shoulder, it is not absorbed into your room rate.
Oh, of course it isn't. So what is the upcharge?
For a non-Malaysian, the permit and the associated conservation fee run roughly $95 per day.
$95 just for the access.
Strictly for the piece of paper that allows you to step onto the boat heading to Sipadan. That $95 does not include your bed, your food, the boat ride itself, or the scuba gear you are wearing.
Which feels completely counterintuitive to how we normally consume travel, you know? We expect a direct mathematical transaction. I pay X, I receive Y.
But here, you pay X, and you might receive Y if it's your turn.
So what happens to the person who just doesn't know this? The person who maybe just wants to pop in for a quick weekend getaway from Kuala Lumpur or Singapore?
Oh, it's an absolute disaster for them. Short-stay bookers or people who try to operate out of the mainland town of Semporna on cheap day trips, they frequently get exactly 0 Sipadan days.
0. Man, that's harsh.
Let's look at the mechanics of why. If a resort has 40 guests and only 10 permits on any given Tuesday, they're obviously going to prioritize the guests who booked a premium 5-night package months in advance.
Right. The high rollers get first dibs.
Exactly. The walk-in or the 2-night backpacker is at the very, very bottom of that list. So they fly all the way to Borneo, they endure the taxis and the boats, they spend well over $1,000 on their total travel investment, and they end up diving exclusively on the muck sites around Mabul.
And look, Mabul has its own unique charm, which we will definitely discuss later, but they came to see the famous Sipadan walls, and they are entirely locked out.
Completely locked
I
out.
can just imagine the frustration at the dive center counter. You're standing there in your wetsuit watching another boat pull away, realizing your entire trip was basically a massive logistical miscalculation.
And we hear those stories all the time. People are furious, but the operators just point to the government cap.
So, what is the absolute ironclad rule here? If you were listening to this deep dive right now and you have your credit card out, ready to book, what do you need to do?
The single most critical piece of due diligence you can take away from our analysis today is skip the trip entirely unless you can secure a resort package of at least 3 to 5 nights that explicitly guarantees your Sipadan permit days in writing.
In writing, not just a phone call.
Never just a phone call. Do not accept a verbal assurance over the phone. Do not assume that just because you are paying a luxury tier price, you will automatically bypass the queue.
Right, because everyone at the luxury resort is also paying luxury prices.
Exactly. If the invoice does not clearly state, includes 1 Sipadan permit day, or however many you negotiate, close your browser and do not get on the plane.
In writing. I love that. That is the armor you need. It changes the power dynamic back in your favor as a consumer.
It's the only way to protect your investment.
Okay, so let's assume you've done that. You've negotiated, you've paid the premium, you have the golden ticket locked in your inbox. The next massive gamble you face isn't bureaucratic, it's atmospheric.
Ah, yes, the weather.
The timing of this trip seems to be a massive variable, right?
Oh, it's huge because the marketing materials you find online, they will happily advertise that the dive season in Sipadan is year-round.
Because they want to sell beds in November.
Exactly. And technically, the dive centers are operating 365 days a year, but the water quality, the surface conditions, and the human density, they fluctuate wildly. Getting this seasonal calculus wrong is the second biggest mistake you can make.
Because open does not mean pleasant.
Not at all.
So let's map the calendar for the listener. When is the actual, honest, optimal window to be in the water?
Broadly speaking, you are targeting 2 specific windows. First, April through June, and then a second pocket from September into early December.
Okay, April to June and September to early December. Why those?
If you hit those timelines, you are experiencing Sipadan at its absolute peak. The seas are calm, which makes the boat crossings pleasant. Underwater, the visibility on the reef walls can easily reach 20 to 30 meters.
Wow, that's crystal clear.
It is. And crucially, this is when you get highly reliable big animal action. You have to understand the oceanography of Sipadan is fascinating. It's essentially a volcanic seamount rising 600 meters straight up from the ocean floor.
Like a giant pillar underwater.
Yes. And when deep ocean currents hit that vertical pillar, they force cold, nutrient-rich water up to the surface.
The upwelling.
Exactly. This upwelling feeds the plankton, which feeds the smaller fish, which then brings in the massive schools of barracudas, the reef sharks, and the turtles. During those peak months, the entire food chain is putting on a very high visibility show.
That sounds like the Blue Planet documentary fantasy everyone is chasing. It sounds perfect. Now let's contrast that. What does the absolute worst window look like, purely from a weather perspective?
You want to avoid the northeast monsoon, which settles in roughly from November through February.
Okay, well, November to February is the danger zone.
Now, the caveat here is that the diving below the surface can actually still be quite good. I mean, the fish don't care that it's raining up above.
Right, they're already wet.
Exactly. But the surface conditions become a severe logistical hurdle. You have to remember, this isn't a resort where you just walk off a beach and you're diving.
Yeah, you have to commute to the dive site.
Right. You have to take a 45-minute speedboat crossing from the mainland just to reach your island. And then you are doing daily boat hops to get out to Sipadan itself. During the monsoon, the sea state gets incredibly rough.
I can feel my stomach turning already.
It's bad. Those boat rides become a wet, rolling, bone-jarring slog. You are literally clinging to a bench in driving rain. And in severe cases, the Coast Guard will actually cancel boat crossings altogether for safety.
Wait, so you could just be stuck?
Yes, meaning you are either trapped in a hotel room on the mainland or you're stuck on your resort island, unable to dive at all.
That is brutal. I am getting seasick just thinking about paying hundreds of dollars a day to bounce over gray waves while turning green. But there's another variable here that isn't related to the weather, right? It's the human element, the crowds.
Yes, and the crowd calculus is arguably more frustrating than the weather because it feels so preventable.
So when is the worst time for crowds?
The worst window for human density is July and August.
Really? Dead of summer?
Yes. And this happens because the Northern Hemisphere summer holidays overlap perfectly with the Malaysian school holidays. The weather is actually excellent, but the permit queue is stretched to its absolute breaking point.
Because literally everyone is on vacation at the same time.
Exactly. And because demand is so incredibly high, accommodations will frequently charge a 20 to 40% seasonal premium during these months. Even the flight prices into the local airport in Tawau spike dramatically.
Wait, let me challenge the logic here for a second. We just established like 5 minutes ago that there is a hard cap of 254 permits a day.
Correct.
So how can the dive sites feel crowded if the government strictly limits the number of human bodies allowed in the water? A cap is a cap, whether it's July or November.
That is a great question. What's fascinating here is the temporal nature of the crowds. You are correct that the raw numbers are low. We aren't talking about a mega cruise ship dumping 5,000 people onto a reef.
Right. It's just the 254 people.
But the bottleneck is entirely driven by time and geography. Because no one is allowed to sleep on Sipadan, all the dive boats from all the surrounding islands, Mabul, Kapalai, Semporna, they all head out to Sipadan at the exact same time every morning.
Oh, I see.
And they all want to hit the legendary named sites first. Barracuda Point, the drop-off, South Point. So you have a capped number of people, sure, but 100% of those people are trying to occupy the exact same cubic volume of water at 8:30 in the morning.
Ah, so it's like a traffic jam at the Mona Lisa.
That's a perfect way to put it.
I mean, it doesn't matter if the Louvre limits daily entry tickets if every single person in the building decides to stand in front of that one specific painting at the exact same minute. It's going to feel like a mob scene.
Exactly. You're just bumping into other divers constantly.
So if you've paid all this money, how do you engineer your way out of that traffic jam? How do you avoid staring at another diver's neon yellow fins instead of a sea turtle?
This is where you have to be highly strategic and you have to communicate with your dive guide. The most effective pro tip here is to negotiate with your boat captain to drop you at Barracuda Point at 7 or 8 a.m.
Get there early.
Right, for the very first descent of the day. You want to be rolling backward off the boat while the other resorts are still serving breakfast.
That requires some dedication.
It requires discipline, yes. You have to wake up really early on your vacation. But it is the difference between a transcendental, quiet encounter with nature and feeling like you're in a crowded public pool. If you get into the water before the Armada arrives, you can often experience the legendary Barracuda tornado entirely in solitude.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate for a second. Let's say I am a massive fan of big animal encounters. I want the sharks, the massive schools of jacks. If I look at the pricing, is paying that 20 to 40% markup in the July-August high season actually worth it? Or am I just getting gouged by resort pricing algorithms?
It really comes down to what you value. If you value structural certainty, it is absolutely worth it. You are paying a premium to guarantee calm surface waters, maximum visibility for wide-angle photography, and the highest probability that the upwellings are pulling in the pelagic life.
So you're buying peace of mind.
Yes, you're buying the closest thing to a guaranteed good time that nature can offer.
But there has to be a compromise, right? A sweet spot for the traveler who wants good conditions but just refuses to pay peak holiday rates.
The classic shoulder seasons are your best bet. Late March, early June, or the second half of September.
Okay, note those down.
In these pockets, you get an optimal trade-off. The prices soften slightly, there is more physical space on the dive boats, and the water conditions generally remain excellent.
And what if your priority isn't the wide-angle, big animal stuff? What if you are a macro photographer? You know, the kind of diver who spends 45 minutes staring at a single square foot of sand looking for a creature the size of a fingernail.
Oh, then you can absolutely manipulate the calendar to your advantage. Macro and muck photographers can easily gamble on the shoulder months or even the fringes of the monsoon season.
Really? Because
Right.
the weather doesn't matter for the small stuff.
Exactly. The creatures they are looking for, the frogfish, the cuttlefish, the microscopic nudibranches, they live in the sand, and the rubble surrounding Mabul Island. They are entirely unaffected by the surface chop.
That makes sense. They're already on the bottom.
Right. Furthermore, because Mabul is not subject to the strict Sipadan permit caps, you can dive there all day, every day.
So you can just dive Mabel in the rain and save a fortune.
Yes, but, and I will issue a strong warning here, if you are a nervous diver or someone who is still mastering your buoyancy, avoid the monsoon months entirely.
Because of the surge?
Exactly. A rolling boat, limited visibility, and heavy surge pulling you back and forth across the sand is a terrible, terrible environment for building your scuba confidence.
Yeah, that sounds like a panic attack waiting to happen. Okay, so that makes perfect logistical sense. You've analyzed the calendar, you've picked your season, you've secured your written permit guarantee. The administrative battle is won.
But the physical battle has just begun.
Exactly. Now you just have to physically transport your body to this remote outpost. And here's where it gets really interesting, because getting there is a literal endurance test.
Endurance test is the precise terminology. The logistical chain required to get from your home country to stepping off the jetty on Mabul Island is a gauntlet.
It's not a direct flight, to say the least.
Not at all. This is where the romanticized idea of an exotic dive trip meets the harsh, exhausting friction of real-world infrastructure. We really need to break this down step by step for the listener.
Let's trace the route. First, you have to fly into Tawau Airport. That's TWU. It is located on the east coast of Sabah. To get there, assuming you're coming from the US or Europe, you are almost certainly connecting through Kuala Lumpur, right?
Usually, yes. KL offers about 6 domestic flights a day to Tawau that take 2.5 hours.
Or, alternatively, you might fly in from Kota Kinabalu in the north, which is a shorter 55-minute hop with about 7 flights a day.
Right.
So you land in Tawau. You've probably been traveling for 20, maybe 30 hours. You grab your massive, heavy dive bags off the carousel, but you are nowhere near the ocean yet.
Not even close. From Tawau Airport, you must secure ground transport to the coastal town of Semporna.
And how long is that?
This road transfer takes roughly 75 minutes, winding through endless, completely repetitive palm oil plantations.
Just rows and rows of palm trees.
Exactly. Now, a private taxi will cost you around 95 Malaysian ringgit, which translates to roughly 20 US dollars.
That's not bad.
No, it's reasonable. And if you are operating on a strict shoestring budget, there is a local bus for about $3. However, it routes through various local squares and towns, and it can add hours to an already grueling travel day.
Wow, I would absolutely pay the $20 to save the hours.
The vast majority of divers opt for the taxi or a prearranged minivan organized by their resort.
Okay, so you've flown internationally, connected domestically, and driven for over an hour through the tropical humidity. You finally arrive in Semporna, and this is where a massive logistical trap snaps shut on a shocking number of travelers.
The timing trap.
Right, because from Semporna, you still have to take a 45-minute speedboat ride out into the Celebes Sea to actually reach Mabul. But those boats do not run on a 24-hour schedule, do they?
No, they do not. We call this the travel day timing trap, and it ruins the start of countless vacations. The absolute last resort boats of the day leave the Semporna jetty at 4 p.m.
4 p.m. That is incredibly early.
If the captain is feeling generous, or if a group is running slightly late, they might push it to 4:30 p.m. But that is a hard stop,
Oh, why so early?
because the ocean out there is not a well-lit highway. Due to shifting tidal conditions, submerged reefs, and crucially the geopolitical security environment we will discuss shortly, nighttime sea crossings are simply not permitted.
So let's look at the math here. If you book a flight that lands in Tawau at, say, 3:30 p.m.,
You are functionally stranded. By the time you deplane, collect your heavy dive luggage, and take that 75-minute taxi ride, it is well past 5 p.m. The boats are gone, the jetty is closed, and you are now forced to spend the night in Semporna.
and I think we need to paint a vivid picture of Semporna for you because this is not a charming, whitewashed coastal village where you want to sip a glass of wine at sunset.
No, Semporna is a highly functional, incredibly scruffy, working fishing town.
Scruffy is doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
It is. It is the transit hub for the entire region's maritime industry. It is hot, the traffic can be totally chaotic, and the waterfront is rough around the edges. It is a place of industry, not a place of leisure.
Right. So if you get stranded there, what happens?
You are going to be out of pocket anywhere from 20 to 50 US dollars for an unplanned, likely very basic hotel room that you never intended to stay in.
So let's review your mental state at this point. You're sweating, you're dragging 70 pounds of scuba gear through a busy-smelling fishing port. You're paying for a hotel you didn't want, and worst of all, you have just lost your first morning of diving.
That's the real penalty.
Because instead of waking up on the island and walking to the dive boat, you have to spend your morning navigating the jetty again just to catch the transfer boat out to Mabul. The psychological toll of that is heavy. You are starting your dream vacation feeling exhausted, ripped off, and behind schedule.
Which is exactly why our critical advice is to entirely rethink how you manage your itinerary. You must engineer a buffer into your travel.
How do you do that?
Book an inbound flight that lands in Tawau by early afternoon at the absolute latest, like noon or 1 p.m. But honestly, even better advice is to actively manage your psychological expectations.
Meaning?
Rather than trying to sprint off a plane, jump into a taxi, sprint to a boat, and immediately throw on a wetsuit. Treat the travel day as just that, a travel day. Build in a dedicated settling night upon arrival at your island resort.
That reframing is so important, a settling night.
Exactly. Don't plan to dive that first afternoon.
Right. You get to Mabul, you unpack your gear without rushing, you have a hot meal, you sleep in a stationary bed, and you start fresh the next morning. It changes the entire emotional baseline of the trip.
It really does. It prevents so much burnout.
So you finally survive that grueling transit, you step off the jetty onto Mabul or Kapolei. Where are you actually sleeping? And more importantly, because this is where the math gets incredibly fuzzy, what does this remote existence actually cost?
The economics of these islands are fascinating to analyze, honestly, because they operate almost entirely on a bundled, captive audience model.
You're kind of trapped there.
Right. You are very rarely just booking a room. You are booking a multi-night, all-inclusive package that bundles your bed, your buffet meals, and a set number of boat dives. But the quality tiers are highly distinct, and the hidden costs within those tiers are where the true financial damage occurs.
Let's run through the ecosystem of these tiers, starting from the ground up. The backpacker tier. We're looking at operations like Scuba Junkie, Uncle Chang's, and Arong Hayat.
Classic backpacker spots.
Right, and these are clustered right on the edge of the working village on Nabul. The brochure price you see online for these is usually around 110 to 160 US dollars per night. But what is the true daily cost once you actually set foot on the island?
To find the true daily cost, you have to add the $95 Sipadan permit. Furthermore, backpackers rarely travel with a full set of heavy, expensive dive gear, so you must factor in daily equipment rental.
Which adds up fast.
It does. When you add the permit and the gear, that $110 brochure price instantly jumps to a true daily cost of between $180 and $230 per day.
That is a huge jump for a backpacker budget.
It is, and you must deeply understand what that money is actually buying you. At this tier, you are getting a very basic room. You might be sleeping under a ceiling fan instead of air conditioning.
In tropical heat.
Yes. At the lowest end of the spectrum, you are using communal bathrooms. And because these lodges are deeply integrated into the local village, there is ambient noise. You'll hear generators, roosters, boat engines at all hours.
Not exactly a serene spa experience.
No. You will also see visible litter in the shallows under the walkways, unfortunately. It is a highly functional setup designed for people who want maximum time underwater, but it is entirely devoid of luxury.
It's the definition of a utilitarian base camp. It's for the younger traveler or the solo diver who just wants to log dives and doesn't care if the mattress is 2 inches thick. Okay, moving up the ladder. The mid-range tier. Operations like Borneo Divers or Sipadan Water Village. These are solid, standalone chalets. The package price is advertised at $180 to $280 per night. What is the reality of the final bill here?
The true daily cost for the mid-range traveler predictably lands between $300 and $400 per person per day.
Okay, so a significant step up.
It is, but this tends to be the sweet spot for a lot of diving couples. The jump in price buys you a much more reliable professional dive operation. The food quality improves significantly, you have reliable air conditioning, and just a much more comfortable sleep environment.
But it's still not luxury.
Right. It is vital to remember that you are paying that $400 a day primarily to access the resort's guaranteed permit rotation and their proximity to the reef, not for 5-star polish or high-thread count sheets.
I hadn't really considered the mechanical aspect of that. You are paying for their bureaucratic access as much as the room.
You absolutely are.
Now, what if I want to bring my family? Say, a family of 4 looking for a vacation.
Families are actually a surprisingly rare demographic here, and the economics completely explain why.
Why is that?
Well, if you do bring a family, you will naturally gravitate toward a mid-tier resort that offers a swimming pool and a protected house reef so the children can snorkel safely off the jetty while you dive. But the math is brutal. For a family of 4, you are looking at $500 to $800 per night total.
Wow.
A standard 5-night trip is going to drain $4,500 to $7,000 from your bank account.
That is a staggering amount of money. And the most painful part is that the non-divers in the family are paying nearly the same resort package rates just to sit on a tiny island with no actual beach to walk on.
That is the ultimate failing of the value proposition for families. Unless your teenagers are already certified, hardcore divers who will utilize the daily boat trips, paying $7,000 to sit on a wooden deck in the Celebi Sea is deeply inefficient travel spending.
Yeah, you could go to Fiji for that. Okay, let's look at the top tier, the luxury tier. Places like Kapalaya Dive Resort or Mabul Water Bungalows. We are talking about those gorgeous, sprawling overwater villas built on stilts over turquoise water. They look incredible in photographs.
They are very photogenic.
The brochure says $450 to $600 per night. But what does the ledger actually say?
The true daily cost for the luxury tier will easily push $600 to $750 per person per day.
Wow, okay.
This tier heavily appeals to honeymooners and comfort-first divers with high disposable income. But here is the critical caveat that disappoints so many people, even at this price point. You are fundamentally paying for a remote, logistically challenging dive camp that happens to have premium wooden villas.
So it's still a dive camp at heart.
Yes. You are not at a polished, flawless 5-star resort in the Maldives. The service will be friendly, but island standard. And crucially, paying luxury prices does not exempt you from the permit rotation.
Oh, wait. So even if I'm paying $750 a day?
You might be sitting in your $700 a night villa wishing you were allowed to go to Sipadan that day, because it's simply not your turn in the rotation.
That has to be infuriating. You feel like you've bought your way to the front of the line, and the line just doesn't care. Which brings us to the trap you flagged in our research, the extras and gear stack.
Yes, this stack.
Explain how this hidden ledger works and why the final bill shocks people so much at checkout.
It requires meticulous attention to the fine print. Travelers look at the advertised package rate and think, okay, $200 a night, My bed, my meals, and my 3 boat dives are included. I'm fully budgeted.
Seems logical.
But they fail to realize that the advertised rates almost universally exclude the $95 daily Sipadan permit. They exclude the local marine park conservation fees. And if you choose to dive with enriched air nitrox, that is an extra charge.
Let's pause and explain nitrox for the non-divers listening. Why do people pay extra for it, and how does it actually work?
Okay, so normal scuba tanks are filled with compressed regular air, which is roughly 21% oxygen and 79% nitrogen. When you dive deep, your body absorbs that nitrogen under pressure.
Right, which causes the problems.
Exactly. If you absorb too much or come up too fast, it forms bubbles in your blood that's decompression sickness or the bends. Nitrox is enriched air. It usually has 32% oxygen and less nitrogen.
So less of the bad stuff.
Right. Because you are breathing less nitrogen, you can safely stay at the bottom of the ocean longer without risking decompression sickness. It's highly advantageous for seeing more of the reef. But because it requires specialized compressors and blending panels back at the resort, they charge a daily premium for it.
So you're paying extra for more bottom time. That makes perfect sense. What else stacks up on the bill?
Well, if you want to rent an underwater camera, that is extra. If you need a dive computer, which, by the way, is mandatory for tracking your depth and your safety stops, that is extra.
You can't even dive without one, but it's an extra fee.
Exactly. And full gear hire, wetsuit, fins, mask, regulator, buoyancy compensator runs $25 to $35 a day. By the end of a 5-day trip, a diver who needs to rent gear, dive nitrox, and go to Sipadan 3 times will find their final bill is 20 to 40% higher than the brochure price they initially budgeted for.
That is a massive financial blind spot. So the fix is clear demands a written, itemized list of inclusions and exclusions before you wire a deposit. And at the bare minimum, pack your own mask and dive computer to save on those daily rental fees.
Absolutely. Buy your own computer.
Okay, let's talk about the day-to-day existence on the island itself, the food and the social etiquette. Because you are on a tiny patch of sand, I assume there aren't a lot of hip cafes to wander into when you get hungry.
There is zero independent commercial infrastructure. You eat the resort buffet.
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Because there is no restaurant strip, no grocery store, and no convenience mart on these islands, you eat what the central kitchen serves 3 times a day at scheduled hours.
And is the food good?
The food is usually a perfectly fine, highly caloric mix of Malaysian rice and noodle dishes, some Western options like pasta or chicken, and whatever fresh fish came in that day. But you have absolutely no choice in the matter.
Which means if you are someone who likes a late-night snack or you suddenly realize you need specific toiletries, you are entirely out of luck unless you planned ahead.
Precisely. If you want a bag of potato chips, a specific brand of seasickness tablets, or extra sunscreen, you must purchase them in Semporna before you cross the ocean.
Stock up on the mainland.
Yes. To give you a sense of the mainland economy, a local meal in Semporna might cost you $2.50 to $4.50, and a bottle of water is 50 cents. But once you step onto the island, you are a captive audience at the end of a very long supply chain.
And they know it.
Resort bars have to boat every single item over from the mainland, so expect to pay a premium. A standard local beer will cost you $4 to $6.
Honestly, that's not as bad as I thought it would be, but it adds up if you're having a few after every dive. And we need to touch on the cultural etiquette here, because you aren't just vacationing on a private, isolated playground. You are in a complex working environment.
That is a vital observation. Sabah is a state within Malaysia, which is a predominantly Muslim country. Modesty in transit is important.
What does that mean practically?
When you are moving through Semporna town or traveling from the airport, dress conservatively. Keep the bikinis and board shorts strictly within the physical boundaries of the dive resort.
Right, respect the local norms.
Furthermore, you'll see the local Bajau Sea community living in traditional stilt houses built directly over the reef, often right next to the luxury resorts.
I've seen pictures of that. It's a striking contrast.
It is, and it is important to understand that some of these people are stateless. They live an entirely marine-based existence. It is deeply disrespectful to treat their homes and their daily lives as a tourist attraction without permission. Always ask before taking photographs of their children or their boats.
That just feels like basic human decency.
You'd be surprised. And regarding tipping the local staff, while it's not strictly mandatory in Malaysian culture, giving your dive guide $10 to $20 at the end of a successful safe trip is highly appreciated and goes a long way in supporting the local economy.
Okay, I have a logistical curveball for you. You go on social media and you constantly see these videos of digital nomads working from laptops on pristine remote beaches. Given the remote setup here, wait, could I just post up in Mabul for a month with my laptop, work during the week, and dive on the weekends?
It's a terrible idea. I would rate this a 3 out of 10 for digital nomads.
Wow, it's me.
First, the infrastructure does not support it. There is no reliable, high-speed internet on these islands. The signal drops constantly, making video calls impossible.
Okay, deal breaker right there.
Second, there is no long-stay housing market. You cannot rent a cheap apartment for a month. You are forced to pay nightly resort rates. And third, the economics simply do not scale. Even if you tried a hybrid approach, basing yourself in a cheap guest house in Semporna for a month and taking periodic multi-day trips out to the islands, you'd easily spend several $1,000s just piecing it together.
And you'd be living in Semporna, which we already established is not a vacation paradise.
Right. If you tried to live on the resort island for a month, you would blow past $5,000, $8,000 very quickly.
So the strategy is to treat Mabul and Sipadan as a highly focused surgical strike, a 4 to 7 night dedicated dive trip, not a slow travel remote base camp.
Exactly that. It is an expedition, not a lifestyle.
So we've done the financial due diligence. Now we need to pivot to personal due diligence. And this is a heavy topic. We need to talk about safety because in this specific part of the world, safety has two entirely distinct layers and blurring them is a dangerous mistake.
You must view safety through two separate lenses here. The first lens is your in-water, physical safety as a diver. The second is geopolitical safety.
Let's start with the physical environment. Sipadan is famous for its massive vertical walls that drop off into the abyss. This isn't a gentle, sloping, sandy beach where you can just stand up if you get tired.
No, it is a high-energy, oceanographic environment. You are dealing with strong, unpredictable currents, particularly at sites like Barracuda Point and South Point, where those deep upwellings occur. You are diving along sheer walls that drop hundreds of meters.
Just bottomless blue.
Exactly. For an inexperienced diver, it is incredibly easy to lose track of your buoyancy and accidentally drop past your recreational depth limits simply because there is no visual bottom to reference. You need solid buoyancy control and strict air discipline.
And if something goes wrong, if someone panics or comes up too fast.
That is the medical reality you must accept before you book. There is no hospital on Mabul Island. There isn't even a clinic.
Wait, really? No clinic at all?
None. The nearest real medical care is a boat ride and a long drive back on the mainland in Tawau. More importantly, if you suffer from decompression sickness, the nearest recompression chamber is a significant distance away.
For those who might not know, a recompression chamber is essentially a massive steel tube. If you have nitrogen bubbles in your blood from coming up too fast, they put you inside, seal the door, and pump it full of pressure to simulate being deep underwater again.
That's right.
That pressure physically shrinks the bubbles in your bloodstream, and then they slowly lower the pressure over hours to let your body safely off gas. It is highly specialized, incredibly expensive medical intervention.
Which is why you must dive conservatively, respect your surface intervals between dives, and absolutely carry comprehensive dive insurance.
Like Dan.
Yes, providers like Dan, the Divers Alert Network, specialize in exactly this. They coordinate emergency evacuations and cover the massive cost of chamber treatments. Holding that insurance is essentially mandatory if you have any common sense.
Okay, so that's the physical environment. Respect the ocean, watch your air, buy the insurance. But the second layer of safety, this is the elephant in the room that I think a lot of people scroll past when booking. The geopolitical reality.
Yes, this is important to cover.
The entire east coast of Sabah is located inside something called the Eastern Sabah Security Zone, or the ES Zone. And it operates under a standing dusk-to-dawn sea curfew enforced by ESCOM, the security command. So what does this actually mean for the listener? We're talking about heavily armed naval vessels and military curfews on a tropical vacation. Should they be terrified?
It requires context, sober awareness, and an understanding of history, rather than blind terror. The reason this heavily militarized security zone exists is due to a historic risk of kidnapping for ransom by armed militant groups operating out of the southern Philippines, which is located just across a very porous maritime border.
Ah, so it's a piracy issue.
Effectively, yes. In the past, particularly in the early 2000s and 2010s, there were tragic incidents on and around these islands where tourists and resort workers were taken. Because of that history, several major Western governments, including the U.S. State Department and the Canadian government, maintain elevated travel advisories for Eastern Silba.
Right.
They literally advise citizens to reconsider travel or do not travel to these coastal areas.
That is a massive red flag. If I look up my destination and my government tells me do not travel, my first thought is, well, my travel insurance might be voided and I am putting myself in active danger.
And that is exactly the calculus you have to make. Now, to balance this fear with current reality, the heavy security presence, the gray naval boats patrolling the reefs, the sandbagged military outposts on the islands, the strict sea curfew, that is exactly why the region is safer now than it was a decade ago.
So the military is the solution, not the problem.
Exactly. The Malaysian government recognizes that Sipadan is a crown jewel of their tourism economy. They take the protection of this asset very seriously. The vast majority of trips pass with zero incidents. You will see men in camouflage holding assault rifles on the jetty, and ironically, understanding the context means that sight should make you feel secure, not panicked.
Think of it like walking past the armed guards at a high-end diamond vault. It looks intimidating, but they're the reason the assets inside remain safe.
That's a perfect analogy.
But it is still a structural discomfort. It's not a carefree, Jimmy Buffett-style beach vacation in the Caribbean where you can just take a kayak out at midnight.
Yeah.
You are in a heavily monitored zone.
You have to accept this reality as part of the geography. Now, practically speaking, for solo female travelers diving within the resort bubbles, it is actually highly comfortable. The dive communities are tight-knit, the guides are protective, and the resorts are secure.
So it feels safe once you're there.
Mostly, yes. The only real friction is keeping your wits about you during the transit through the mainland towns. However, for families with young children, the sheer presence of military patrols, combined with the remote access to medical care, often makes parents deeply uneasy.
So the takeaway is check the fine print of your travel insurance to make sure it covers regions with active travel advisories, dive conservatively, and accept that the military presence is just part of the landscape. Go with your eyes open.
Precisely.
Okay, I am exhaling now, because we have covered a mountain of friction. The impossible permit lottery, the grueling travel days, the hidden financial costs, the deep water currents, and the geopolitical curfews. At this point, I think anyone listening is wondering why anyone goes here at all. What is the payoff that justifies running this gauntlet?
People endure all of this friction because when Sipadan delivers, it delivers one of the most profound, dense wildlife experiences on the planet. The absolute highs here are earned by the biology of the reef itself, not by a marketing department.
Paint the picture for us. Put us in the water. What is the best moment?
The absolute peak experience is dropping into Barracuda Point early in the morning. You descend along the wall, and suddenly you find yourself inside a slow-moving silver tornado of thousands of chevron barracuda.
A literal tornado of fish.
Yes. They circle around you in this massive hypnotic vortex, literally blocking out the sun above you. It is entirely mesmerizing. Or it's hanging on the edge of the drop-off and realizing you are sharing a single patch of water with dozens of enormous green and hawksbill turtles.
Dozens. Like, at once.
They are everywhere. They are sleeping on the coral ledges. They are slowly surfacing for air. They are cruising past you at arm's length, completely unbothered by your presence. The sheer density of marine life is staggering. And remember, this spectacle is included in your $95 permit. You aren't paying a massive upcharge for a manufactured turtle encounter. It is just what the reef naturally is.
But there's a sleeper highlight too, right? Something people don't expect to love as much as they do, which happens back on the other islands.
Oh, the muck diving around Mabul and Kapalai.
Explain muck diving for anyone who hasn't done it, because honestly, it sounds like swimming around in a dirty puddle.
It is a terrible name for an incredibly rewarding activity. Instead of looking at huge, sweeping coral reefs and massive sharks, you are hovering just inches over sandy, rubbly, sometimes silty bottoms. You are looking for the weirdest, most alien creatures in the ocean.
The weird stuff.
Mabul is world-class for this. The dive guides have eagle eyes. They will find you a flamboyant cuttlefish flashing neon yellow and purple colors to warn predators. They will point out a frogfish that has evolved to look exactly like a piece of orange sponge, completely motionless.
Wow. Camouflage.
Exactly. You might see the highly venomous blue-ringed octopus, or watch beautifully patterned mandarin fish performing their mating dance at dusk right beneath the wooden pilings of the resort jetty. It requires patience, but it is a macro photographer's absolute dream.
So Mabul is for the macro, the tiny details, and Sipadan is for the wide angle, the massive scale.
That is the perfect way to delineate the two. And often, divers come back saying the muck dives on Mabul were actually the most memorable part of the trip because the bizarre creatures were so unexpected.
Okay, but we promised the unfiltered verdict. What are the sobering lows? Where does the fantasy break down when you are actually there?
The biggest letdown is usually the physical environment above the water. Mabul is a small, heavily worn island. As we touched on earlier, the contrast between the luxury water villas and the impoverished, stateless Bajau stilt houses is stark.
Right. It's not a pristine, isolated resort.
For many Western tourists looking for a pristine escape, it is an uncomfortable juxtaposition. You will see visible plastic litter washing up in the shallows near the village. If you are a non-diver, you'll be profoundly bored. There is no long stretch of pristine white sand to walk on. There is absolutely zero nightlife.
It sounds like managing your expectations is the most important thing you can pack. You shouldn't overpay for private boot charters thinking it will unlock some secret VIP luxury experience. You are there for the biology, plain and simple.
Yes. And the absolute biggest disappointment is psychological. It is the expectation that every day will be a Sipadan day.
Which we know isn't true.
Right. If you go in thinking you will see the Barracuda tornado every morning, you will be miserable on the days you were assigned to dive the rubble around Babul. You must embrace the muck dives. If you cannot find joy in looking at a microscopic nudibranch, this trip might break your heart.
All right, so with all these pros and cons, all this friction and beauty, how does this destination stack up against its global rivals? Because if you have $5,000 to spend on a dive trip, Borneo is certainly not your only option.
It is not. And to truly evaluate Sipadan, we have to look at its two major Indonesian rivals. Let's start with Alternative 1, Raja Ampat, Indonesia.
The crown jewel of biodiversity.
Exactly. Raja Ampat is the natural rival for a bucket list tier reef system. Now let's look at the cost difference. Raja Ampat is generally more expensive to reach and more expensive to stay. You are looking at live-aboard dive boats or high-end eco-resorts that run $250 to over $600 per day.
So it's pricier across the board.
But here is the massive fundamental advantage. There are 0 daily permit lotteries. You pay your one-off marine park fee at the start of the trip, and you dive wherever the boat captain takes you.
So you're essentially buying freedom and structural certainty with that extra money, but what does Raja Ampat lack compared to Sipadan?
It lacks the singular, concentrated, big animal density on a single wall. Raja Ampat is completely unmatched for pristine, sweeping, colorful coral gardens and sheer biodiversity. The number of different species of fish and coral is staggering.
But it doesn't have the tornado?
Right. If you want to be surrounded by 40 sea turtles and a tornado of barracuda while looking out into the deep blue on a single wall dive, Sipadan still wins that specific category.
Okay, what about Alternative 2? For the people who maybe want to spend less money or who loved the sound of that weird alien muck diving?
That would be Bunaken and the Lembeh Strait in North Sulawesi, Indonesia. This destination pairs a dramatic, deep coral wall at Bunaken with what is arguably the best muck diving on Earth in Lembeh.
It sounds like the exact same Sipadan plus Mabul formula, but located in Indonesia.
It is structurally very similar, but the cost difference is significant. It is much cheaper. Resort packages there often run $120 to $250 per day. And again, there are no hard, randomized daily permit caps.
So a budget-conscious diver gets far more actual time in the water for their money.
Exactly.
But the trade-off?
The trade-off is that while the walls at Bunaken are stunning and full of turtles, they do not quite match that intense, one-of-a-kind, big animal pelagic action of Sipadan. It is a notch below for the wide-angle spectacle.
Okay, it is time for the final scores. Let's run the matrix for our listener and give the verdict. Let's start with the backpacker. Is it worth it for them?
I give the backpacker a 7 out of 10. It is a rare value to see a world-class spectacle like the Barracuda tornado for a true daily cost of $180 to $230 if you secure the permit.
That's a big if.
It is. The caveat is you must book a multi-night package and you must accept very basic, noisy living conditions.
What about the mid-range couple? The people spending $300 to $400 a day for air conditioning and a solid dive operation.
8 out of 10. This is the sweet spot of the entire ecosystem. You get comfortable accommodation, your permit is generally secured by the resort's allocation power, and the quality of the diving absolutely justifies the price point. Just make sure both of you dive, or the non-diver will resent the isolation of the trip.
And the family, mom, dad, 2 kids, looking at spending $4,500 to $7,000.
4 out of 10. I would strongly advise against it. Unless your kids are older, Certified divers who can handle deep currents and longboat rides, skip it.
Just too much money for not enough payoff.
That amount of money is far better spent on a calmer, lower advisory beach destination in the Caribbean or Thailand, where the kids can actually play on a sand beach and you aren't worrying about naval curfews.
The luxury traveler,
Yeah.
dropping 600 to 750 a day on a beautiful overwater villa.
6 out of 10. It is beautiful, yes, but the value proposition is narrow. You are paying top-tier prices for a remote dive camp, not a polished 5-star spa resort with flawless service and fine dining. And remember, all that money still does not buy your way out of the permit lottery. You are subjected to the exact same rotation as everyone else.
And finally, the solo trip. The photographer who just wants to shoot weird critters in the sand.
8 out of 10. It is fantastic for a highly focused 4 to 7 night macro photography trip. The dive communities are welcoming to solo travelers, and you will get incredible photos. Just do not try to treat it as a digital nomad workspace.
So it all comes down to one absolute golden rule. The entire trip hinges on one piece of paper. Do you have a guaranteed Sipadan permit in writing before you board that flight? If yes, prepare for the dive of your life. If no, prepare for an expensive lesson in travel bureaucracy.
The reef will always uphold its end of the bargain. You just have to navigate the human obstacle course to get there.
And before we wrap up today, I want to step back from the spreadsheets and the logistics for just a second, because there's a broader theme here about how we interact with the planet.
There really is. Think about the evolution of the world's most incredible natural wonders. As we look toward the 2030s, this Sipadan model, the hard caps, the rotating lotteries, the naval protection, and the extreme logistical friction, it might not just be an anomaly for elite scuba dive sites.
What do you mean?
It might actually be a preview of the future of global travel itself.
That's a heavy thought. The idea that everything beautiful will eventually be locked behind a gate.
But it's highly plausible. As the global middle class expands and more people want to travel, pristine nature simply cannot survive unrestricted access.
We'll just destroy it all.
Exactly. Are we entering an era where experiencing raw, untouched nature requires accepting the intense bureaucracy of a gated community? We might see this exact model, permits, lotteries, strict quotas applied to rainforests, to glaciers, to mountain peaks.
And the question you have to ask yourself as a traveler is, if it saves the reef, if it saves the ecosystem from being loved to death, is the loss of spontaneous adventure a price we're willing to pay?
It's a trade-off we're all going to have to face.
Wow. Is the end of spontaneity the price of conservation? That is something to chew on while you're sitting on that 45-minute speedboat ride. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take these insights, use them as your armor for your own travel planning, read the fine print, demand things in writing, and whatever you do, don't miss the 4 p.m. boat out of Semporna.
Safe travels, everyone.
If this gave you the honest verdict you needed, follow the show. New episodes drop every day. That is the honest verdict from Phil and H.